Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris is an RPG that retells the story of the first Alicization season, and then progresses to tell its own original story, introducing new characters along the way, and providing you with an RPG experience that will certainly please the fans of Hollow Realization. However, it also feels like a game with outdated RPG systems, really poor optimization, and really bad writing. So if you're coming from Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, know that this one is very different. Bandai Namco sent me a code for PS4 so I could play it and bring you guys this review. So my name is Globku, and this is Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris. It all starts with Alicization. Kirito wakes up in the underworld, a virtual environment with no memory of how he got there, and the first season of Alicization starts to unfold. The full season is only the first chapter of this game, but it takes around 15 hours to complete. It does have a lot of cutscenes, so if you were to skip all of them to get to the good stuff, it will probably take you around 5 hours or so. This portion of the game is single player only. The game has online multiplayer, but it is locked until you reach chapter 2. And this first chapter is a bit slow. It holds your hand for a lot of it, as it slowly introduces its different systems. Chapter 1 works a bit like a very long tutorial. I highly recommend you guys watch the first season of Alicization before playing this, because the game tells an abridged version of the story, but also introduces a few original story elements. There's a new character that's introduced to you early on. Throughout Chapter 1 you'll learn her backstory, her motivations, and this will be an important character for what comes after. So in a way, it's more than Alicization, and it will keep people who already watched it engaged throughout this chapter. Most of the story is voice acted. Probably what I found most impressive on this whole game is the sheer volume of voice lines. Those voice actors spent months recording all of this, from start to end. Most of this story is voice acted, not all of it, but it is impressive regardless. The cutscenes are not so impressive, however. They are poorly paced with a lot of filler dialogue. You can spend 10 minutes in a cutscene without any real story progress, and a lot of them have this visual novel style, so they're not even rendered in game. There are rendered cutscenes once in a while, and some very extremely rare CG cutscenes that look amazing, but there are so few of them they're barely worth mentioning. Also, the game is in Japanese with English subtitles, so if you were looking for a dub, you're not gonna find it here. During Chapter 1, you'll learn most of this game's systems, starting with combat. Lycoris follows the RPG trend of having action combat blended with RPG systems. If you've played Hollow Realization, Ni no Kuni, the Tales series, or even the most recent Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know the style. Though attacks in this one will feel a bit slower and more deliberate. If you hit the attack button, you are stuck in the animation until it is over, making it a bit more thought out and less button mashy than a few of the examples above. And this combat system has a lot of depth to it. There are different colored attacks, some are unblockables, others are a chance to stagger opponents. You have several defensive moves like a block, timed guards, directional deflects, a dodge, and of course your special moves, which can be chained with your teammates' specials for bonus damage. The fights have a nice rhythm to them. Not only are you managing your own SP, you're managing your parties too, trying to time everyone's special attacks. And the enemies themselves go from attacking you to this staggered state called Hazard, from where they can be launched and downed, and some abilities will deal bonus damage in these states depending on the weapon you have. There are 9 weapon types in total, and they really play differently from one another. Some are better for stunning enemies, others are better for burst damage or taking advantage of those launched and down states. Each weapon has its own skill tree to unlock, and on top of that, across this entire skill tree, you'll find passive buffs and other active abilities to customize your loadout and that of your teammates. Just like your character, you can also change their special attacks, what bonuses they bring into battle, and even give them some tactics to follow. Sometimes it feels like teammates just stand there and do nothing, but since you can order them to attack at any time, I found this got better the more I played the game and got used to its systems. The variety in weapons and the amount of skills brings a depth that's honestly a bit overwhelming at first, but in a game as long as this is a very welcome feature. There will certainly be a meta and guides out there if you just want to look up something good, but there will also be room to explore and optimize your build by finding new skills that no one else is using that are really powerful in combination with others. And on top of all of this, you have the Sacred Arts. Sacred Arts are this game's magic. This wheel has all the elements available. You charge a spell and it becomes stored until you decide to cast it. At first it looks simple, and then you find a random statue out in the world that gives you a new spell for an element. Each element has 3 levels of spells, all of them with different effects. On its own, it's fairly simple, but when you put it on top of all the other systems, it's beautiful. and it's what will allow players to play as healers or as tanks in multiplayer, helping you diversify your roles. And since we touched on that statue, let's talk about exploration. Just like combat, exploration also has some neat ideas. The first chapter will give you quite a few areas to explore, This is not a true open world, instead it has a lot of open areas with loading screens between them. Pretty long loading screens if I might add, but we'll get to that. And within these areas you'll find side missions, boss encounters, chests that contain new weapons, and these statues. At first the statues will be inactive, but as you progress they start talking to you, and most of them just want you to kill X amount of monsters. Pretty boring stuff. But then some statues will give you new sacred arts, or unlock new branches on your skill tree, which really encourages exploration. And these statues are usually in hard to reach places, so the game requires you to climb mountains, you know, Skyrim style, or create new platforms with your metal element, or buff your jumps with the wind element. These are all very good ideas if the movement in this game was actually designed for this. It's simply not precise enough for these types of jumps. And the side missions are probably the worst part of it all. Their design is outdated. They're all the same thing. It's fetch quests or kill quests. Sometimes you kill a boss and that's neat, but most of the time is kill 10 rabbits or go fetch me some ingredients. Most of them also don't track properly on the map, so you have to know where the rabbits are or the materials, which is odd because some other quests do reveal the location of your objective, so that also feels inconsistent. The reward you get from these can range from being useless to really cool. For instance, when you arrive at a new area, you'll usually find a village in trouble. You complete the first side quest, and now the villagers trust you with their issues. And by completing each person's side quest, you'll unlock new vendors or blacksmiths, and in a way it feels like you're rebuilding these towns. And it's very rewarding because each vendor actually has different items or weapons for you to buy. It's different from place to place. But other quests also feel pointless because the reward will simply be a couple of items that are required for this other quest you accepted somewhere else, which is really discouraging given that the activity is also monotonous and outdated. Not to mention a lot of these NPCs have been glitching out for me, completely vanishing or sinking under the map, so I wasn't even able to complete a few quests without reloading the area. And speaking of technical issues, let's address the biggest problem of them all. This game is one of the worst optimization cases I have seen in this generation. Consoles will struggle to maintain 30 FPS. I am playing this on a Pro. Along with not running at a stable 30, it has massive frame drops during exploration and combat. Loads of objects will pop in when you fast travel to a new zone, and constant slowdown during battles. For as good as their ideas of exploration and combat are, they are plagued by these performance issues constantly, which makes playing them not as fun. The PC version can run at an uncapped frame rate and doesn't have a lot of these issues, and honestly, if I could transfer my save file, that's where I'd be playing right now, but it requires a very beefy machine. These are the Steam requirements, and even then, it's not immune to the occasional frame drops. And I have to ask, looking at these specs and looking at this game, do you think these are warranted? There is absolutely no excuse for this game to require this much power or run this poorly on console while looking like this. It's not an amazing looking game, it's not doing anything groundbreaking with physics or animation, or even the number of enemies on screen at any given time, and to top it all off, it can have some insanely long loading screens depending on the area you're loading into. Though on the other hand, I also have to mention that the fast travel is incredibly fast. If you're traveling within the same area, it's just a quick fade to black and fade back. Bandai Namco did tweet that they're working on a solution, which gives me hope that we'll see improvements, but with how bad this all is, I doubt it will ever be without any issues. And finally, to wrap up my problems on Chapter 1, because yes, we're still on Chapter 1, the first 15 hours of this game, we still have another 40 hours to get through, but I'll try to be brief. The game features autosaves, but it chooses not to use them. The game only autosaves after a few main missions or at the start of each chapter, and you can only manually save on specific spots, which are the same ones you can fast travel to. Which means that if you die while exploring or die while doing side quests, you could potentially lose a lot of progress. And I don't know how a game comes out in 2020 like this. Anyway, let's move on from Chapter 1. Fair warning, I will be talking about the end of the first season of Alicization. I try not to, but I need to talk about it to explain how this ties into the original story they're telling in chapters 2 until the end of the game, and why it sucks so bad. You see, Sword Art Online was always a two-part anime. The first half of a season was all about the virtual MMO, the technology that allowed players to be immersed in these worlds, and their implications in the real world. And once that whole plot was solved, the second part of each season would be Kirito's Harem Club. This happened over and over again in the Sword Art Online anime. But with Alicization, it didn't. The entire season was about the virtual MMO plot, and I particularly liked how the real-world story evolved alongside the virtual world story in this one, making Alicization probably my favorite season of Sword Art Online so far. To me, SAO has evolved past the harem tropes but this game disagrees. So, after the fight against the administrator, no one dies, Yu-Gi-Oh isn't a sword anymore, and here come all the waifus. Kirito immediately wakes up from a coma because the girls touched him, and it's at this point that I start skipping cutscenes. From this point on, the story is so bad, it seriously feels like some third-rate fan fiction. Also, the villain has now turned into a tree and is gathering energy from these plants scattered across the world. So get ready, folks, because the bad quest design is about to get even worse. These plants will spawn monsters to protect it, which is cool. Combat is still fun, so I don't mind that. But then you have to kill the actual plant, which usually has way too much health, and it literally doesn't fight back. So it's just like attacking a training dummy. And you do this over and over again. And this isn't some side activity. This is main story stuff. You will need to kill a lot of these plants, attacking a target that doesn't fight back. Who thought this was good game design? However, it's at this point that the map itself also starts to open up even more, and we start seeing a huge variety of environments. These areas are huge, each one of them with their own theme. Some of them will even have villages that you're trying to build up, and if you want to read the quests, they all have their issues that you need to solve in order for their vendors to unlock. The quest design doesn't get any better, but at least you're doing the same thing in a different environment, I guess. Now, I will say that many of these areas also feel the same because the activities of each area aren't varied enough. Every area will have those statues, the chests, the boss fights, so most areas end up just blending in together without much to tell them apart, but there are some very cool exceptions. It's also in Chapter 2 that you unlock multiplayer and avatar customization. The customization is very limited, but you can change your avatar's appearance, even make them male or female. Female will unlock the chest slider. This right here, folks, says everything you need to know about this game. Instead of having more options for customization that would apply for both male and female characters in this already very limited character creator, what was absolutely indispensable for this game was the chest slider. This, my friends, is the tone of the game from this point forward. Multiplayer is very freeform in this game. There's no PvP, but you can literally do everything together, be it the story missions, the boss fights, the side missions, everything. Up to 4 players can play together, and you can even have players just joining and then doing their own thing on the other side of the map, and still be in the same session, which I found has its upsides and downsides. On one hand, if you have friends to play this with, it's awesome because you can just be in the same session making progress at the same time, and if you need to take care of something, you can go on your own way without having to leave the session. On the other hand, this makes a very bad experience for random matchmaking, because the game lacks direction. You can say which quest you're doing when you set up the lobby, but if a player joins, he won't necessarily help you out. Or if you join someone else, it's not always obvious what they're doing. Especially if they're doing a quest that you haven't accepted, you won't even be able to see the monsters that they're fighting. And it's not like multiplayer doesn't come with its downsides. As soon as you open up your game for multiplayer, the game limits the number of members in your party to 1. So you can only have 1 character following you around, which is a massive nerf to your damage, since a lot of it comes from chaining your special moves together. And if your co-op partner is nowhere near you, it can take you a much longer time to kill anything that needs killing. Chapter 2 also unlocks social quests. The waifus are here for a reason, and all of them want to talk to Kirito, or your customized avatar, who is still Kirito in cutscenes. You can have a heart-to-heart in these spots marked on the map. Here you can initiate a conversation and select from these dialogue options, or get closer to them and start being very weird. Once their mood goes up, you can hold their hand as you walk around or carry them everywhere. And you don't unlock anything in particular by doing this outside of trophies. Oh, and this? Wait, I can't explain. It's a review. From Chapter 2 until the end of the story, it will take around 40 hours, or at least it took me 40 hours with some decent exploration and doing some side quests, although I was fast forwarding or skipping a lot of cutscenes because the story is just bad. I wasn't fully skipping them, I needed to know what was going on, but whenever the girls started being horny for Kirito or some integrity knight was reporting that a monster or a plant was spotted in a village, that's when I'd skip because we all know where that was going. So overall, 55 hours to beat story mode, can be even longer if you want to watch all the cutscenes, can be shorter if you want to skip all of them. All of it to arrive at the quote-unquote real game. With the story out of the way, you can finally focus on the good aspects of this game. There will still be a lot of side missions or social quests, but also a lot of boss fights with weapon rewards, a lot of leveling up to do, getting ready to tackle some of those higher level enemies. You finish the game at around level 40, the final boss fight is a level 50, but in the world, you'll find level 80 bosses. There's a lot of post-game content, and all of it can be played in multiplayer. Hopefully with players that will actually help you out with your missions. You'll keep gaining skill points to complete your skill tree, finding statues to complete your sacred arts, getting ready for the promised raids that are coming out later. You can see a lot of signs in this game of future content. Weapons have a rarity attached to them that goes from 1 to 5 stars, but no one has found a 5-star weapon yet. There are several areas that are locked that you can't explore. You can see that there's a plan for future updates, and as far as RPG systems go, this game gives you everything an RPG needs to give you to progress with your character, to optimize your build, to get better gear, and to give you enough variety so that your character feels unique and different from anyone else that joins your game. But it took 55 hours to get to this point, and it's not like the technical issues have disappeared. The outdated quest design is still there. The only thing that's not getting in the way anymore is the story, which is liberating, allows me to focus on the aspects I like about this game, even if it is still, at the end of the day, a pretty mediocre RPG. With all that said, it's time to score this game. If you're not familiar, we use letters as our review scores. F and E are the bad games, D and C are okay or mediocre, B and A are the good games, and this is my score for Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris. The bottom line is, it's a bad game that you play for 55 hours to unlock a mediocre RPG with the promise of future content. If that's something you want to power through because you like Sword Art Online, that's something only you can decide, because this is not a cheap game. Despite it looking like a budget game, it is full price. And I can't even recommend it to Sword Art Online fans because I don't know what that is. Sword Art Online was two different things for a very long time. And to me, Alicization was cleaning that up. But this game ignores that in favor of my least favorite aspects of SAO. And the good parts of this game are mostly its RPG mechanics, which have nothing to do with the characters or the show. It's just a solid RPG with a lot of performance issues. And that, folks, is my review of Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris. If you've played the game yourself, go ahead and let me know what you think of it in the comments. That way, if someone comes to this video wanting to know if they should buy it or not only do they have my opinion, they can read yours as well. Go ahead and give it a score, from F to A tier. Where do you think this game is? And as always, thank you very much for watching. My name is Globku, and I'll see you next time. Bye!